Okay, let's give it a while more. We have more people tuning in. Hello, everyone. I'll probably... Okay. Okay, let me start now. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Happy Tuesday. Saying hi from Lloyd's Market Development team based in Singapore. My name is Hannah Lui. So it is my utmost pleasure to welcome everyone today on behalf of the Lloyd's Academy as well as the Lloyd's Asia team to our flagship APMEA Emerging Risk Series 2025. So these webinars are designed to bring you the latest insights as well as practical strategies on the most pressing risks shaping the insurance industry today. So this year, our series is back bigger and better than ever as we have 6 focus webinars happening every Tuesday, starting today, Tuesdays and Wednesday throughout May. Quick disclaimer before we begin. The views expressed here by our speakers today are their own and they do not necessarily reflect those of Lloyd's Corporation as well as the service companies. Please note this series is intended for educational as well as informational purposes only. And also remember that nothing shared here constitutes as formal advice or is an official Lloyd's position. In terms of CPD hours, you'll be happy to know that each webinar qualifies for 1 CPD hour. And in order to receive recognition for this, please stay with us until the end of the webinar, and I will be providing a feedback form later in the chat. Please fill that up, and then you will be getting your 1 CPD hour for each of the webinars that you attend. And finally, please use the chat function that we have and Q&A function to engage with our speakers today and ask plenty of questions throughout this meeting. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers for today's session on accurate insurance valuations. We have Lilian Ching from Regional Head of Asia from John Ford and her team of amazing speakers. So let's kick off now with our speaker's introduction. Lilian, over to you and your team.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Graham Copland, and I'm going to talk and present today, and my colleague Gregory Dickerson will also be adding to the input into the presentation. As correctly said, we're going to look at actually a John Ford introduction for those that might not know us. Then we're going to look at the importance of accurate costs and valuations and how they're changing in the market. We also have some market conditions. We all know we're going through some volatile times, past and present. So we'll look at that and what future market conditions that we're certainly looking at and future trends in the insurance replacement costs that will affect the values moving forward. We'll then give you some insight to our valuation approaches and then finish with some case studies and key takeaways. The presentation should take about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll go to some questions and answers at the end. Introduction to John Ford. Actually, an old valuation practice established in 1828, founded in London. I think more importantly, with our strength and our positioning in this part of the world in Asia, we opened our office in Singapore in 1990. Our job in the insurance market, in the insurance spectrum, is to look at the insurance valuations. And we just focus on the reinstatement valuations. And over the years, we've looked at simple and complex risk. I suppose John Ford is known more in the complex risk area, the petrochemical plants and the infrastructure that we look at. And one of the advantages that we have is that we're independent, and that really is recognised throughout the industry as part of, if you're going to put a opinion on the value of the replacement assets, then the best form of basis is to be independent. And as said, our role is to bridge that gap between the insured, the insurance companies, and the brokers and the insurance profession, whether it's in Singapore or the asset is being placed internationally. So the importance of accurate costs. What we see in Asia and the Middle East, and really globally, is that there's a large element of underinsurance. Underinsurance being that the insured or the client perceives to bear is offering a value they're not aware of the cost to replace the current asset. So it's not often intentional. It's often used because there's a lack of understanding of how the policy will react to the insurance value at the point of loss. Clearly, we all know if there is a major loss and there is underinsurance, we often get contentious insurance claims, and that can seriously delay payouts. We've been involved in one particular case on the claims or loss side where the insured was arguing over the sum insured 2 years after the claim. So again, it's not a pleasant situation to be in, and we, or professional valuers, try and eliminate and reduce that situation by ensuring that the values are correct on placement or renewal. Because again, we don't want to be in a position where the final settlement that's given to the insured after a loss is not adequate to the initial loss. One of the major things that we see, and again, this is more what we see when we speak to insured and how they derive the sum insured. Often they're using their net book value as the sum insured. And this example here is a simple straight line analogy of the client using a net book value, which is often an accounting function and is a way of depreciating the assets over a period of time, the economic or the commercial life of the asset. So they can declare less the depreciated values. That's the net book value. And often, as we know, and certainly coming through COVID and inflation and the future volatility, the cost to replace an asset is increasing more than reducing. So that's where 90% of the time we see assets that are underdeclared because the accounting net book value is being used. Now, as I said earlier, that doesn't mean that the insured is deliberately underdeclaring. Often it's an education, and they're not aware that the policy would replace the asset for a new asset. They believe that the asset they believe that net book value is their sum insured. In our world, as a professional value for the insurance profession, our job is to put a fair and reasonable replacement value on the assets. And that's where we come in. So the replacement with new value, often in line with the policy. We have seen clearly policies that have indemnity or market values. We can place that value on the asset. But most of the appointments we get is to put a replacement value on those assets. Now, we have seen clients, as I said earlier, using the net book value, but there is clients out there that actually overinsure, believe it or not. And that's more or less, more from our experience, more in the semicon or the telecom or the higher tech industries, where they've took their original costs and added too much indexes or indices to that sum insured, or sorry, to that original cost, and they overinsure the assets. So we see that occasionally, as I say, in the higher tech industries, but clearly underinsurance is the major factor because they're not taking consideration of the current costs. Now, in today's market, as I said, where you've got volatility, you've not only got the reduced cost, the underdeclared cost, but you've also got the added factor of the increased costs since COVID. And this next graph clearly shows that where we're now trying to set the scene of looking at where we currently are. And this is the problem as professional valuers. We've never seen a situation like this where we're coming from COVID into driven by high inflation, and now we're moving clearly into a period of volatility. So again, what we're trying to do here is set the scene. If you had clients that were insuring their assets in 2018, pre-COVID, you could see just based on market forces in today's market that we've had quite a serious increase. And I know we believe COVID is a thing of the past, but it's still a major factor when you're looking at the cost to replace an asset. In most of the asset types, values haven't come down. In some certain types they have, like steel, for example. Steel prices we're seeing be reducing because of the dumping of construction steel on the market is driving the cost down. But simultaneously, we're seeing the concrete prices increase. But again, this is just trying to give you a flavour of what we're up against all in the insurance market, of how costs have been elevated because of the market forces, and they haven't changed. So if people asked us just 3 months ago what our perception is of the values moving forward, we would have said we're going into a period of stability, even though that values won't come down pre-COVID, they're settling out. What we're going into now, who knows? But it's an interesting situation we're all in. Just to give you a flavour of some individual assets, this is what we've seen just since COVID. And we all know we have insured that have these type of assets in their facility. Fabricated steel and cranes, they're all quite a big increase. When we talk about specialised machinery and control systems, again, very limited supply, so therefore you'd expect costs to go up. But we're also seeing labour increases, not only material and ex-works price cost machinery increases, we're also seeing the technical and consulting services increasing. And we put that down to a lack of, when you're looking at professional skills that work in petrochemical facilities or have knowledge of rebuilding petrochemical facilities or power, there are actually quite a few retiring off. So the technical and consultant services costs, because those professionals are fewer and far between, the costs we see have been elevated. So again, just trying to set the scene, and one more there to see just how we looked at an asset recently in Dubai. This is just one statistic that we're looking at, that just in 2 years you can see the cost of cement. And again, you put that down to a lot of construction in Dubai, so the supply and demand. A lot of people need steel, and they need concrete, and it's driving the price up. So again, trying to set the scene for you to now look at some future trends. So future trends in the insurance replacement values. Let's look at a few. Rapid inflation and volatility. Escalating material labour costs driven by global inflation. This is what we've been seeing probably since 2019, is the rapid inflation. And we think moving forward, as we move into volatile period, it's going to get even worse. Now, the impact on that is that replacement values need to be frequently looked at to keep up with rising costs. Again, often one of the questions we're asked is how frequent. You should have an independent or a professional valuation practice look at the assets. In a volatile market, it should be a lot more of the risk management approach. So to cross-check or benchmark these assets on a more regular basis. And again, I just want to show you a case study in that area. So this is tariffs, and that's the #1 news item at the moment. Tariffs, what's happening with it? We actually, I don't think anybody in the world knows. We're trying to work it out. But what it does create is it creates volatility. And again, if our view is that even if we didn't have the tariff we went back to just before the tariff situation, there's been a kink in the world trade now. So there is going to be some consequences moving forward. We think as it feeds through, and not necessarily just in the States and the US, but we are going to see supply chain issues and assets become more expensive globally because of just the scarcity and the kink in the economics of it all. So again, significant supply chain instability, naturally from our experience, leads to timelines and increase in material and labour costs and machine costs, which is then seen in the replacement cost of a future asset. We are trying to monitor the trends, but again, it's just to show you that one of our future fears is that how we're going to measure the tariffs and how they can become how they're reflected in the insurance in the cost to replace an asset. As I said, inflation and volatility, that's what tariffs feel. Now let's look at our future trend 2, which is technology obsolescence. This is happening with or without volatility. It's happening because of there's new machines out there, there's new technologies out there, there's new ways of constructing assets. And we, as best as we can as professional valuers, have to try and build in those technological obsolescence into the cost to replace an asset. So it's the most modern equivalent that we can look at. Now, clearly, we've got to look at a partial loss and a total loss in situations like this, but we, as best as we can, are trying to look at the impact of the technology on the cost to replace an asset. And a perfect example of this is the telecoms industry. So we in John Ford actually value quite a lot of telecom assets. And recently, when we looked at some in Asia, there's a lot of obsolescence. There's a lot of assets that are old technology. There's a lot of countries now moving clearly to 5G from 4G, and that's creating a lot more system type assets than hard assets. Many years ago, when we first started looking at fixed line telecom assets, as an example, there was hard switches. Those switches are soft switches now. They're in a computer system. So again, you've got to look at the software. You've got to look at the assets that go around the actual assets that are used to replace, and also how the old assets are replaced with newer assets, and what is the obsolescence factor that goes into it. So again, as I said to someone earlier, talking about obsolescence, it's better from our view is to log. If you have a valuation and you're at least putting what you're going to replace it with in that valuation report, that's a lot better situation, more good risk management for the insured than not having that value and not having that report and document for the market. So again, it's trying to mark the actual true modern equivalent replacement of the assets in a valuation report. Future trend number 3, we're seeing certainly some when we're looking at some assets for replacements, we're seeing some assets now that if they're a global coverage, each country will have a green rebuild or sustainability asset. It's still happening. We're seeing it not so much in this part of the world, but we are certainly seeing it in the European countries and the certain USA assets that we look at. And this is clearly what that drives everybody to, is to look at increased upfront costs that could potentially cause higher replacement values when you look at the asset, when you're looking at replacing the asset with asset like for like or modern equivalent assets. And here's an example here. We have a client that has multiple locations, manufacturing hotels, and offices. And again, each one would have a different look at. If it's in a different country, or it's in a different location, or it's in a different standard, it'll have effect on the cost to replace the asset. This is a small future trend. We're not seeing a lot of it, but it is, as I say, something that we certainly think will come into play in the next couple of years, as and when people still want to move forward with rebuild standards with the green element. More and more, we're seeing climate risk and resilient requirements. When we're seeing assets now in major Nat Cat zones like Japan, for example, we recently looked at a series of power plants, and the rebuild or the infrastructure on that was a lot higher than a comparable power plant in another country, because it was such a nat cat region that you have to have a look at it. So again, the impact on that is that the climate risk and the resilience risk is an element, and we again see it as a future trend, but it's going to affect the infrastructure and what we call a hardened infrastructure. An example of this, we've put an airport in there. We recently did the airport in a very remote island, and again, because the rising sea levels, the reinstatement value of that has got to be looked at, because of what the potential climate elements and impact will be on in the next couple of years. As I say, that and green are major trends that are affecting most of the assets that we look at in the Middle East and Asia, but it is going to be somewhat of a major factor in the next couple of years. What we are seeing quite a lot is building code evolution, requiring often the compliance with latest codes is actually affecting the values. It does have effect on the replacement values, and it actually could affect a major difference in geographical areas. And I'll explain that in this example. Heritage, for example, we look at heritage buildings, and in Asia there's quite a few heritage buildings, and even though they were built over 100 years ago, you wouldn't, because of modern building codes, you have to then relook at the piling on that particular system or the substructure. You couldn't put it back into situation as it was. Now, there is certain codes, and there is 3 levels of heritage rebuild. One might be you can use modern equipment, modern construction techniques to put that asset back, that it just has to look old. Or there is heritage grades that are you've got to resource it from the original supplier. We did one, I believe, in Hong Kong, maybe over 15 months ago, but the replacement asset on that was high level, and they wanted the same tiles that were put on about 150 years ago. And amazingly, I'm told that that manufacturing company is still manufacturing. They're still making the tiles in Guangzhou or China somewhere. So again, heritage, and you've got to look at the building codes, but you've also got to look at the rebuild, the partial loss, and the actual heritage grade on the rebuild. Some valuation approaches. The audience might not know how we actually value assets, but any professional valuation practice probably usually has 6 approaches in their system and their procedures. The traditional way, like risk surveys, we like the site surveys. There is certain clients that we have that insist we go to site because it's a physical inspection, and if they have a major loss, at least we can sit there and say we actually saw those assets in place, and we can see the configuration. Site surveys give us a lot. It is the ultimate of looking at the assets, speaking with the engineering, how the assets would be replaced, what type of materials, what type of configuration, and again, more we would try and drive site surveys on more complex risks. So petrochemical plants or an airport, you would like to get some form of site surveys. During COVID, and if we've done a good site survey, we actually undertook a lot more desktops. The advantage of desktops is, as it is, it means you don't have to go to site, but you are reliant on the client delivering, giving you the correct information for you then to use your experience within the valuation practice of trying to put a fair and reasonable replacement value on the desk. Now, if for example, we have a quite experienced team in John Ford, so they've seen quite a few similar assets, who are able to have confidence in the values. So we undertake quite a lot of desktops. Again, as a valuation practice, we have to be comfortable that we can support the values in the unfortunate event of a loss. So if we don't feel comfortable that we can do a desktop and put a defendable or a professional replacement value on those assets, we would certainly request for more information or a site survey. A desktop and virtual survey, more or less the same. Again, this was developed in COVID, where we needed to have eyes on, and that would be something like a data center or a telecom asset, where we needed to see what was actually in a cabinet more than in more detail. Again, ways and means as we can do it. As John Ford and professional valuation practices around the world, it's not just us, we're now moving towards modeling, trying to use AI, trying to use analytics and models to come up with some fair and reasonable replacement values by both using our experience and our and modern technology to understand how the actual assets would be valued. Now, usually analytics and modeling come up with a range of values, so it's a bookend type approach, and that often gives the insured the comfort or a quick look at the sums insured that they're comfortable with it. Clearly, again, if the modeling and analytics determines that there's major underinsurance, then I'd like to say, okay, give us the option to go in and do a site survey so we can put a more accurate or a more realistic or a more professional view on the assets. Now, I'm not saying modeling and analytics isn't professional. There actually is, but there is some limitations at this stage to it because of valuations is often not a pure science, but it's also not a pure mathematical approach. It's more also a science of looking and using experienced valuers to use their experience to put some realistic values on the assets. John Ford is also driving benchmarking, and again, that's more to give the client the insured an understanding of where their portfolio or their assets are sitting to determine the next steps of the valuation approach and risk management approach. I just want to go through some case studies now. The very reason insurance is in place is to protect the insured. This was actually the Thai floods in 2004 to 2012, I believe. John Ford, we were appointed after the loss. And again, this particular loss was due to a high level of rain in northern Thailand, and it came down, and those that will remember this were probably involved in this, and it was a major loss of over $20 billion, I believe, both property and BI. So it was a major loss. From what we got involved in, there was a great deal of Japanese-owned assets. And our view on it was that there was quite a underinsurance in certain locations due to a lot of developing countries moved their secondary manufacturing to developing countries, and when they transfer the machines from one country to the other, they put an intercompany transfer price on those assets to take it from one book to another book. And in certain cases, that transfer price was used for insurance. So the cost, when we were invited to look at this from the reinsurance market, as I said, 12, 15 months after the loss, when people were questioning the original sum insured, we had to look at it and determine what the replacement was and what the actual situation was before the loss. And again, this involved a lot of experience from our older valuers, but it also involved modeling and look at capacities and looking at the asset registers that were out there. There was situations where average was paid, and the next slide shows that. Now, I know the audience, you will know more about this than we do, but we know that average has a major effect. And this is just an example, a standard textbook example of where an asset, if it's underinsured and there's a major loss, that the client can be out of pocket by a large sum of money because they haven't adequately originally insured their assets. So you can all go through the little basic equation, but what that means is that, as I said, someone in that organisation has to explain to the board and or the risk committee of why they were underinsured. So having a professional valuation before any loss makes this problem vastly go away or highly reduced, because if the insured has had a professional valuation in place before the loss, the valuation practice and that number can be used obviously for placement, but it can also be the valuation and the valuation company is then on the side of the insured and is in a position to best explain the values to the market in the unfortunate event of a loss. Now, clearly we're going through some case studies here, so I'll pass this across to my colleague Greg to give you some view of, again, just things that we're seeing in the certain markets that we're looking at.
Hi, good afternoon. Greg Dickerson. We do a lot of work in the power industry, and a lot of the valuations we do are for combined cycle power plants. And what we've found over the years is that prices have been impacted by the EPC contractors. So the prices haven't been increasing across the board by a standard inflation rate. So the initial EPC contractors we will work with were the likes of Bechtel, McDermott, Black & Veatch, JGC. And about 10 or 15 years ago, they were replaced, or they were competing with the Korean EPC contractors, Samsung, Hyundai. And now we've been finding that the Chinese contractors are moving in and they're competing with the Koreans. We've just been in one of the stands where we valued a 1,500 megawatt combined cycle power plant. The gas turbine, steam turbine combinations were from Germany and Japan. The heat recovery generator was from Canada, but everything else on that site was from China. And that does impact the cost of that project. Have Chinese workers building it, and Chinese equipment, which we haven't seen 10 or 15 years ago. And we're told by our clients that the Indian contractors are moving in now and also putting pressure on the Chinese prices. So if you're a board of directors, you've got a PPA for 20 years, you look at four prices put in front of you. Generally, they go for the lowest price because they're guarantees and warranties once the power plant is started. And all they want to do is generate as much profit as they can from the actual units that they're installing. Now, this leads us to another factor which we're finding a lot more in Asia especially. So manufacturing, some of our clients have been in business 20, 25 years, and they have original equipment suppliers from Europe, Japan, USA. Now, they're saying to us, well, we can actually buy alternative equipment from China or Korea. We have a pulp and paper client who has European paper machines. They are getting the design and engineering done in Europe. The equipment is built in China, and the facilities are actually installed by local contractors. And of course, that has a huge impact on the price versus getting an EPC contractor from Europe and installing it with European engineers in Asia. We have similar in petrochemicals, especially in Korea. We act for a very large refinery there that's been in business for 40 years. The original production units were Japanese, European, and American. Now, most of it could be built by the Koreans. Even the big compressors are built under license in Korea. And again, that makes an impact on the sums that we value them at and how we would come about evaluation. We've been observing an LNG facility which has been built in a Western country. All the LNG production units are made in China. They are being transported to this facility, and they will be bolted together and then turned on and commissioned. And again, we understand that the price of labour in the Western country is approximately $8 an hour versus $1 an hour in China. Now, obviously, the prices, the rates per hour are much higher, but that's the ratio, 1 to 8. And so that does have an impact on insurance values.
Okay. So we also look at a lot of renewables, and clearly the theme through this presentation has been increases in costs. We are actually seeing some costs come down. Solar, there was a trend pre-COVID where they went up, but they're now drastically being reduced because, from our experience, there's a lot being made in China, and there's a lot going from China onto the market. So the first law of economics, supply and demand, it's driving the price down. But we are seeing on the other side where the renewables and the wind turbine prices are increasing because these, and again, from our observation, to manufacture a solar panel is relatively simple technology and quite straightforward when you compare it to a blade or even a wind turbine. So again, we are seeing different values and different values based on the actual renewable type of asset it is. Just to try and, I'm conscious of time, so I'll go through this quite fast, so not to lose time on the question and answers. But as Greg says, we get involved in oil refineries. And this particular one that we have been working on is, as I said, over 40 years old. When we were originally involved in it, they were using indexes, and we had to go in and use first principles. To give you an understanding of first principles is this cost build-up example that I'm going to quickly go through. We would look on a major petrochem facility at the individual assets, what we call the group component level. So we'd understand that. Now, clearly in a volatile market, the price of a column 10, 15 years ago would change quite drastically in today's market. And as Greg said, a lot of them are now made in country and being imported from the usual European or Japanese suppliers. This particular series of assets here, you'd say we would know the purchase witness total. We would then take that total and add in what we call the direct build-up costs of the controls, instrumentation, and the civil works. It's a 67 million. Then you add that basic simple into the actual engineering. And again, as we've seen engineering and supervision costs increase, certainly after COVID, and the construction expense, not necessarily the contractor margin, but you would then offer that insurance replacement value. You're looking at it from one approach because this is more realistic and more explainable than just using an asset register and adding an index. Again, we see clients saying they've used indexes, and the amount of indexes they've used that are wrong. The consumer price index has nothing to do with the cost to replace a major plant and equipment asset. But clearly, this approach is a lot more defined and a lot more scientific approach than using just indices. We do a lot of mining, and again, mining, above ground, coal processing, open cast. These have an effect on things that supply and demand. We see a lot of mines in Australia where the demand is coming in from overseas. We get a lot of mines that we see is the equipment is either coming in internationally or being made local. So again, you've got to look at it. I won't go through this because of the moment of time, but it's in there, and it's the same approach of how you'd actually look at the total replacement value. The last case study we have before we go to finish off on the key takeaways, data centers. We're getting involved in quite a few of these globally. We've done some in the US, Middle East. We get clearly with telecom clients, there's a lot. What we're observing on the trend with data centers is they're becoming more outer city. The power needed to supply them because of AI and the use of more, they're packing the data centers a lot more with technology now. So therefore, actually the floor loading is becoming a significant factor because the buildings have to be of certain building code to take the loading, the increased loading of the actual racks, but also the power supply and the cooling environment systems all have to be looked at together with the critical infrastructure and the level of the level of network security there is in there. It all has effect on the actual assets. Most of the data centers we're seeing are tier 4, and there's a set sort of classification to that we get involved in a lot. So we've been asked to leave some key takeaways. So in our view, the key takeaways are: ensure there's accurate coverage, ensure the insured asset is neither underinsured nor overinsured, avoiding that financial loss or excessive premiums. Clearly, faster claim settlements. If you've had a pre-established documented value, it streamlines the claims process and reduces disputes. Compliance. So clearly, the risk management and the compliance is always there. Good risk management is part of evaluation. Is good. It is part of good risk management. Identifying asset vulnerabilities, promoting good risk approach. It all helps the insured have a successful insurance coverage in the market. So that's really us. We've got about 40 minutes. So thank you for listening, and we're now available for any questions and answers. Sorry, and we'll try and answer them.
Okay, thank you so much, Graham and Gregory, for a really, really insightful over 40 minutes of sharing. So I'm looking at the Q&A chat to see if we have any questions. So, okay, we just got one. So the question asks, how does valuations fit in the claims process? As you mentioned on the slide here, in the claims process, if there has been a loss.
Yeah, in simple terms, look, if the insured has a value as part of their risk management, has a valuation in place, from our experience, it does ensure a smoother claims process. Now, it depends clearly the valuation report has to be current. It's pretty difficult for a valuation practice to support a valuation report that's 5-7 years old. But if they've got good risk management and they've got up-to-date current values, then in the unfortunate event of a loss, our report or the professional valuation company's report is looked at from both the insured, the claims team in the brokerage side, and the loss adjusting market, and they're more comfortable. More often than not, they're more comfortable with the values, and it makes the whole process or the issues around the property values go away.
If there is a loss and John Ford have prepared a valuation, we often get asked by the loss adjusters to help them with the reserve. We would speak to the insured and say, we have done a valuation for you. Can we help the loss adjuster? And they will say, yes, but just copy us into any correspondence. And generally, well, to date, touch wood, the loss adjusters have accepted our valuations, provided they're current, and they move forward with the loss settlement, which just makes claim settlement, which just makes life easier for everyone.
Okay, thanks for the answers. We also have one more question coming in. So the question asks, how do we know whether John Ford used a different country alternative for machinery in your valuation report?
We have to be very careful. So I'd use an analogy that you have a BMW 7 Series and you want to insure for a Ford Mondeo. So what we do is we visit the site, we discuss with the engineers, we highlight what could be replaced with alternative equipment from Asia generally, and then we write a report so that everyone who's looking at that insurance valuation report understands how they've insured their assets. So if they have a BMW 7 Series and they've insured it from Ford Mondeo, that's all they get. And so that's it. As long as the valuation is written clearly and everyone understands how they've insured the assets, we haven't had any problems with any of those types of valuations to date.
Okay. Wow, now the chat is exploding with lots of questions. Okay, one more. In your work experience thus far, what was the difference in quantum swing in claims that has shocked you the most when an insured does not get the right valuation?
Yeah, I think the Thai floods were the key. As Graham said, a lot of the manufacturers in Thailand, they transferred assets from Japan at net book value, and they continue to insure them at net book value, whereas the replacement, their insurance policies were on reinstatement or replacement, and there was just a vast difference. And then that comes down to a negotiation.
Yeah, over quite a few years of doing this, we have seen, I mean, we worked on one several years ago where an insured hadn't looked or hadn't changed their values on their major building since the 1980s. Now, clearly, that's wrong and that's poor risk management. But we have seen that situation. Underinsurance is more common in a claim than overinsurance. So yeah, nothing surprises us in the claims arena once we get involved in it. Now, yeah, it's something that we've got to on a claim when there's a valuation we're appointed, we've got to justify that value and then leave that to the loss adjuster and the legal experts to do their magic.
Okay. Well, everyone else, please keep your questions coming in. We have one more in the chat. Does John Ford have a stance on the extent of impacts of the recent US tariffs? So just now earlier in the slides, you mentioned about the tariffs as well, and other transient price surges like solar panel dumping due to oversupply.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I was in the Middle East about 4 weeks ago, and one of our very large clients who are building a lot of renewables said that the OEMs from China had been onto them offering much lower prices because they couldn't export their solar panels to the US or Europe competitively. But our big concern is, and our researchers are constantly monitoring the prices in the market, because we believe that once everything stabilizes, there'll be a lot of companies go out of business, and then there will be potentially less supply capacity and prices will start increasing. So there is something to monitor, but yeah, certainly the tariffs, both in Europe and in the USA, are impacting prices outside of those markets.
Okay. Well, hope these replies answers the question. Now, one more, I think this question is asked really often, and the question says, how often should an asset or assets get revalued?
I think that's down to the risk appetite of the insured and the risk policy. We have insured, have it in the risk management committee that the assets should be valued every 3 years. We have them to say it should be looked at every year. Clearly, the more volatile markets, in a more volatile market, the more you look at your subs insured on a more regular basis, the better. In a stable market, I used to say it depends on the asset type. For example, a steel mill, you'd look at that every 18 months, 2 years, maybe review your assets. But a fast technology moving industry like telecoms, if it's having a major refit of 4G to 5G, you should be reviewing that every renewal, which should be on a 12-month basis, whether it's just a desktop review or an update. So again, it depends on the risk appetite of the insured and their policy, and also the asset type.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we have time for one more question, and the question here asks, in cases where an on-site valuation survey is not feasible, what alternative methods or industry best practices you recommend can be employed to verify replacement or market values?
Yep, yeah, that again, clearly through COVID, we couldn't go to site. As old school professional valuers, we like to go and have a look and feel the assets so we can get a good feel for the replacement situation with the on-site team. we have developed technology now and desktops and modeling that gives us the comfort that we can supply a professional value that can be supported. So as I try to explain in the in the presentation, there is technology and methods available to us that enable us to put a value on the assets, even if it's remotely. As I said, our number one in John Ford is that we have to ultimately be able to support the values we present, whether they're overinsured and underinsured. And sometimes people assume we know John Ford get given the sums insured. Sometimes we don't know what the client is insuring it for, so we go in and have to put a professional, independent, third-party value on those assets and support it. And again, we might be told later that the client has it actually insured for less or more than we've presented. So again, it's more important that we have to defend, or defend's the wrong term, explain the values and be comfortable from our professional level that we can support them.
Okay. Thank you so much, Graham, for providing a really succinct answer. Okay, I'm conscious that we have a few minutes left. Any other closing comments? Since I look at the Q&A, there are no further questions. Are there any other kind of closing comments or final remarks that you would like to share with the audience today?
No, I think, as I say, I just want to reiterate that whether it's John Ford or another professional valuation practice, part of good risk management is getting the sums insured correct. Sums insured are critical for MFL or EML setting. They're important for protecting the client, and they're also important that the insurance market is getting the correct premiums for the risk that they're supporting. So again, it's all to me. I think it's very critical, and certainly in volatile markets, to get that valuation correct.
Okay, and what about Gregory? Any final thoughts?
Well, I don't know. It's pretty hard. I mean, tariffs. Who knows what's going to happen next? But we are monitoring it. I think one of the impacts we've seen is that people are not making decisions because they don't know what's going to happen next. But we're still out there. We're waiting, and yeah, I mean, it's once things settle down a bit, hopefully it'll be clearer how the tariffs are going to impact insurance values, and we'll just try and track that as best we can.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. So
Thank you.
once again, I'd like to say a big thanks for to our esteemed speakers from John Ford. Thank you so much for your time, for joining us on this lovely Tuesday afternoon. For everyone here who are still in this meeting, please fill up the feedback form that I've just sent in our discussion. If you can click the link and fill up the feedback form, and then that will give you your CPD hours. So yeah, thank you very much for this lovely presentation. And so for everyone else who are joining us tomorrow, we'll see you guys same time with another topic, and the next topic tomorrow will be the silent cargo, and that will be with Andy from Blockchain. So we are done for today. So please, yeah, feel free to fill up the feedback form and let us know what you think about the session with John Ford. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.